Welcome to this episode of Blended, Blessed, and Always a Mess. I'm Aric.
And I'm Angie.
We are married with a ton of kids.
We have 6 kids total. He has 3 and I have 3.
My name's Hallie and I love riding horses.
I'm Lexi and I love agriculture.
My name's Carter and I love eating.
My name's Chace and I love lifting weights.
My name's Summer and I love spending my parents' money.
I'm Dane and I love baseball.
Our show is about our blended, blessed, and always a mess life. And our hope is if you find yourself in the same situation we are in, that by sharing our story, all the fun and all the mess, the challenges we are experiencing, it will give you some inspirations, laughs, and community, knowing you are not alone in this mess.
We appreciate you spending time with us. Let's dive in.
Thank you for joining us today for Blended, Blessed, and Always a Mess. And Angie and I are super excited today because we have another guest on hand, and it's one of my longtime good friends, David Rowe. It's a big part of our story, actually, is my relationship with David and his bonus dad, Bill. And if you go back to episode 6, which is titled, You're the Devil, that entails my relationship with my bonus son, Chace. And at one point, he just lost his mind and shouted, "You're the devil." You can hear the entire episode. We would then go on to have Chace on and visit with him about how that, because he laughs about it now. I laugh about it now. But when we first started dating and trying to blend our family, we've always agreed, like initially with Chace, that was really difficult.
Yeah, so we had talked about how it was Valentine's, right? We ran into Bill and Vicky, which is David's mom and bonus dad, and started talking about just the challenges. We were knee deep in the struggles of trying to blend, and it truly was game changing when we talked to them. And they basically just said, don't change a thing, keep showing up, stay the course. And that's really like all we needed to hear from someone that had been through all that. And it was positive in the end, but just acknowledging it's hard. It gave us that renewed kind of energy to like, okay, we can do this.
Yeah, and on the backside of that, I would show up at David's work like I do from time to time. We would visit. He would share with me, his struggles with accepting Bill initially and what he was trying to achieve. And so I was already kind of working through that with David, how he was trying to handle things and some of the things that him and I would talk about. So with that, David has been willing to join us today. And one of the things we're excited about is you are on the other side of it with your own family now, and you've turned into a fine human being.
He didn't die.
He didn't die. Yeah. But at the time, you were kind of a jerk for a while, right? I mean, those are just words you've shared with me.
Absolutely.
Maybe even more intense than that. We'll try to keep it PG. But, So, all right, David, talk to me a little bit about, you go, how old were you? Your parents go through a divorce, and then you meet Bill, and what was that kind of like for you?
So I'm guessing had to be 7 or 8 years old, and probably 2 years of just living with my mom and my older sister. So it was just the 3 of us. I would see my dad every other weekend, and then mom starts dating somebody, and fast forward, they get married, and it was Bill's first marriage. So he didn't have any kids, anything. He was single until they got married, I think, when he was 36, 37. So this guy's living the bachelor life, working and doing his thing, and then we just kind of drop into his house. And I think that's where it all went crazy initially. So, we go from living the 3 of us in our own house, and then we move into his house, which is immaculate. Nothing's out of place.
It sounds like me.
It sounds familiar.
Bill pinned his socks together when he put them in the dirty clothes.
Oh, my God.
I've never heard that, but I love that.
So, things like that. So, you can think of that, and then everything's in its perfect place. And then my older sister and I show up, and, things change.
You mean you didn't pin your socks together?
Did not.
That's funny.
So it's a bit of a culture shock, which was the same when we blended our family, right? I'm more of a, what's the best way to put it?
Oh, well, you want me to say it?
I'm more very involved and engaged, and at that time used a very aggressive voice at times. We've toned that down. Still very involved and engaged, but my presentation is a bit different with the kids. And that might have shocked your kids a little bit. My kids used to it, but your kids were not so used to, here's how we do things, this is how it's going to be.
And I think for that, so I was obviously young. I mean, I'm 47, so this is 40 years ago. But, you go from, I don't really have much memory of my dad, mom, and my sister and I living together. Bits and pieces, but not much of anything. So essentially, my memories kind of start of just my mom and my sister and I. So as much as my mom, she was working a full-time job, and maybe making my bed was a suggestion.
That sounds familiar.
And a lot of things, and mom's trying to juggle all this stuff as a single mother now. So I think we got away with, I know there's things that we would have gotten away with, whether she was at work and maybe we were home after school or something to that capacity. I don't, like I said, it's 40 years. But I do distinctly remember moving in with Bill, and it was like, no, you are making your bed. You're going to do this, this, and this. And at that, you go from 8, 9 years old, whatever it is, to where not necessarily just pure freedom, but again, some things were suggested. And then I think...
Well, as a mom, you got to pick your battles. So, what do you want to fight them on?
And those things, there's just a few things that have, after we had talked about doing this, and these things that just pop into my head. Again, Bill was single, lived by himself, the bachelor life. He would have a Pepsi free.
Oh my God. You really have been thinking about that.
And it would be in his refrigerator. He lived by himself. He'd always have one, and he had it, and it was in a glass, the single serving, they were glass bottles with screw tops, and he would have one in there, and he would just want to drink, and he would screw it back on, stick it in the refrigerator. And moving into his house and having like soda readily available was like a new thing. Like, wow, we have soda. So I'd go in there.
But did you have soda?
So I'd go in there and take a little drink. I wouldn't screw the cap back on as tight as Bill would liked it. So when he'd go back, there was no carbonation in his soda. He always had a frozen Snickers bar in the freezer that he would just take a bite.
Pepsi and Snickers.
Yeah,
your dad, yeah.
It's like moving into a candy store and
a strict candy store.
Yeah. So things for that those are just minor things where Bill was probably like, what the hell did I just get myself into?
Right.
It was great dating, and they could go home at night and go stay at their house. And but some of the things those are, they're funny, but yet those are just the tip of the iceberg. And when you get into more serious things, and I guess ultimately life lessons that he's trying to teach you at a young age, or us, my sister and I, this is BS. And you're really not my dad. And that's a struggle. I still feel bad about that to this day, because, Bill was new to this. We were new to it. It's his house. He married my mom. Yeah, whatever. I'm going to drink your soda and eat your Snickers.
Oh, my God. Did you ever tell him you're not my dad? Did you have that conversation?
So I'm sure I did. Nothing distinct but I do remember we had some property in southeast Missouri. It was a little lake and had a camper that was on it and whatever. And we were going down there. It was 4th of July weekend. And all I wanted was a candy bar, a soda, and fireworks.
4th of July seems perfectly reasonable.
And so leaving St. Louis, when we lived in St. Louis at the time, I think if you ask Bill, I was on repeat. Probably every minute. I want soda, I want candy bar, I want fireworks. Finally, we stop outside of somewhere between St. Louis and Cape. He stops, and I get a soda and a candy bar and fireworks. And then we get back in the car, and I just busted out crying. My mom's like, what's wrong now? And I really like Bill, but I miss my dad.
Yeah.
And, 40 years later, that's tough. It's still tough because this guy's trying to make everything. And I don't even know if they were married at the time or whatever. It was very serious. So they were either engaged or whatever. And, looking back at it, it's like, gosh, this guy hung on still. And to go through those, as you guys talk about it, you go through those things and you're just like, is this going to change? Is it going to?
Yeah.
Me, coming from my point of view, I didn't care if it changed. Whatever. I wasn't concerned if Bill's feelings were hurt then, Bill's a great human being. He's smart enough to know that this transition was it wasn't going to be rainbows and unicorns. But, for me, yeah, there's times in my mind, like, I want my dad, it's my dad. And I don't know when it clicked that Bill was sufficient to be my, I know the bonus is, which I much more prefer than calling it a step parent, but he was a wonderful stepdad, and it evolved, but it took a long time.
Yeah, and so
a long time.
I'm glad you brought that story up because I love, your mom has told us that story before. I love that story. And I think that's really when Angie and I talk about this podcast a lot, blending families. We have so many people reach out like, it's so hard. And that was what your guys' story really helped us with, was that it was hard and it had the happy ending. And so I think what a lot of kids we have found in our discussions and even with our own is like, especially for a boy, right? You want to have a relationship with your dad. You're wired for that. Girls do too. Girls want a relationship with their dad. So how do you like the new parent and still form the relationship there and realize that maybe that parent is going to meet some needs that your real dad maybe couldn't. And maybe that's not your real dad's fault. It's just that he's not wired that way. But now you've got this other parent that can do that. And so now you're kind of torn feelings wise, and you went through that. Like you're a case study, and I went through that, all those emotions.
Two totally different people. Obviously, why they probably are not married. No, and so at that age,
you even moved in with your dad for a short period of time.
So when I got to high school, or I guess, my freshman year, and I moved to go live with my dad in high school. I think a lot of that was the yearning of not having my dad as a day-to-day. I saw him on the weekends or once a month at that point. I don't know what it was. But the setup was, he lived in St. Louis. We lived here in Columbia, so it wasn't too far away. But there was a lot of things, I don't know, unanswered questions at the time. Because you have two different thought processes. I have a stepmother too, and same situation with her. She was never married. She never had kids. Yeah. I mean, the situations kind of mirror themselves in the dynamic of the family. We didn't have, stepbrothers or sisters coming in, but we did have families that we had. Bill has two sisters, and, his mom and his dad, which were unbelievable, took me in and, treated me, in my eyes, they treated me no different than, and Jody and I, my older sister Jody and I, we're the oldest kids, instant grandchildren for my grandparents, and niece and nephew for Bill's two sisters. So that helps a lot because, you go to these places for the first time or first family Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever it may be. And like I said, my memory is not as great, but I can think of times where you go into those places and going, am I going to be accepted? Mm-hmm. Am I going to fit in? You go back and think stories aren't going to include you because it wasn't, your first birthday that they're talking about. All of a sudden you're 8 years old and, life with this family starts now. So those are tough, but, in my mind they were tough. But their family, and same with on my stepmom side of the family, same thing. They made me feel like I was part of the family. And again, Jody and I were the oldest of any cousins, so now it's instant right in their face. And it could go a lot worse. But, I think that more specifically on Bill's side of the family, it was his mom, his dad for a short period of time. He passed away. They made us feel like, Jody and I feel like I said, we were there from day one, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and your parents have always done that. Alice and Kenny, who we just interviewed, they've always done that. My kids have always felt like they were just an instant part of your family because of that.
And we've all seen it where a grandparent will treat a step as like a step. Like you're just kind of, there was never I never saw on our side okay, my younger cousins are going to get this. You're not really part of this. And it does happen. I hear about it.
Yeah, no, it definitely happens. I know of close friends that there's even the count of another number of grandkids doesn't include the step. It blows my mind, right? Like, that's so crazy.
And that is a part, I think, of making the blended families work. Because if it doesn't, and, the parents, granted, when you guys got married, it wasn't like you went to your parents and said, hey, I need you guys to be on board with this. You guys fell in love with each other. You got married. You were going to get married essentially regardless.
Right.
But it'll make it a hell of a lot easier if you guys are on board with this and make my kids, your kids, their kids, whatever, all part of the same.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go back then briefly. You end up you have a good relationship with your dad. You had a good relationship with Bill, and those things took work. So you move in with your dad for a little while, but then you end up coming back home and living with your mom and Bill. What happened? Was there a change? Was there a change when you came back, or did that still take more time to develop? Talk to us about how you, I think.
Well, I'm gonna jump in real quick with that particular story. So when we met up with Bill and Vicky that night, she told that story that you had, decided to go move with your dad, and it almost like as a mom, that was my worst fear, honestly. When we started blending and it was tough and challenging, I think most parents probably ask, like, what if it doesn't change, to your point? I'm like, what if my kids don't want to come live with me and because it's too hard or it's too contentious or they, don't like Aric, like all those fears. And my fear would be that my kids would then want to not live with me at all. Then she tells that story. I'm like, oh God.
So, yeah. So I left right before my freshman year started. And a lot of that was the unknowns. Like, I didn't know my dad as my dad from when they got divorced and he moved out when I was 7 years old or whatever. And then going fast forward, and we lived with Bill all the way, for years, and going to live with my dad on the weekend, going full time. And at the end of the day, it broke my mom's heart. I left. I was going to be a freshman, and I guess being a freshman, transitioning and all that, trying to figure out what life is really.
Right.
I made that decision. No pressure from my dad, my stepmom. Hey, come live with us. Never once was that ever thrown in my way. They both gave me that decision or choice to make that decision on my own. I did, and it was tough. I ultimately moved out of my father's house, I'd say halfway through my senior year. I went and lived with my mom's sister just to finish high school in St. Louis. I guess the side of this is that it was a very tough, my freshman, sophomore, junior year. I was not perfect by any means. And I had a younger brother and sister that my half-brother and sister in St. Louis that, we're 10, 12 years apart. And then you got this kid in high school and me doing high school things. And so that part of the blended family at that time, it was tough.
Yeah.
And my ultimate decision was I needed to get out of here. And I think it was ultimately agreed upon my dad, my stepmom, and myself. It was like, this is toxic right now. And probably more me than them.
You're not the saint you are now, huh?
Yeah.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. What do you mean you want me to have a job? Little stuff like that. And, again, ultimately I just went and lived with my aunt halfway through my senior year, finished out high school, moved to Columbia to come back here to go to school at Mizzou. But, so it was not, I don't know. It's weird, but I did have I learned a lot too. It wasn't going to be perfect. When I moved in with my dad, I think probably part of my mistake that I made was I knew my dad on the weekends. It wasn't day to day. It wasn't, you're going to do your homework. You're going to mow the grass. You're going to do this. So that was part of, when you're 14 years old, you're not thinking about that. You know your dad on the weekends or you spend a week in the summer there. And this was great. We just did nothing all week and just hung out and went swimming and did whatever, go to Six Flags. And then reality of life sets in.
Yeah.
And it was fine. But then, again, me being 17 years old at the time, that as most 17-year-olds know everything in the world and nobody else can tell them differently, and again, I had a younger brother and sister in that setting there where, we're 12 years apart. And that was tough, I'm sure. And I have a great relationship with my dad and stepmom. It's the best it's ever been. But there's things that, and again, I think the fear of, I couldn't imagine. I mean, I know now, back then, it's like, okay, Mom, I'm 2 hours away. You know? Now it's just like, wow, that sucks.
But to your point, if you felt like there was something missing, you had to go figure it out. And that's a hard part of parenting too, especially. It's like you almost sometimes have to allow them to make their own choices so they can go through those hard life lessons, unfortunately.
Yeah, because if they don't fail at it, they don't believe you know. Yeah, for sure.
Well, and if I didn't do it, then it would be that whole, like, what if?
Right.
I did it, it worked for a while, then it didn't. Is that right or wrong? I don't think so. It's those life lessons I guess you learn or a lesson you learn at 17. It's tough. Again, I have two sets of parents, whatever, that were supportive in whatever my decisions were. They liked them or not. Again, that fear of your child saying, hey, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But they made it to where, hey, and I'm sure I struggled with it and came to my mom. And ultimately, David, this is going to be your decision. And then put that on my plate. And it wasn't like then anybody could ever say, hey, we made you do that. Sucks on, this was on me. And again, even then at 14, going out and mowing the grass and for when I lived with Mom and Bill and the things that we did. Bill, now to this, fast forward now, it was before now, but things that Bill was teaching me, even when to screw on the cap to the Pepsi bottle, to feeding the dog, setting the table. Jody and I had responsibilities. Those sucked, but those are mini life lessons that morph into bigger life lessons that get to bigger and see why I was, at that age, you're like, I don't need to know that. I don't need to make my bed. I'm just getting ready to go mess it up.
God, we hear that all the time.
Even now, though, like Chace will say things when he gets frustrated. He'll be like, you always have to have me say everything just perfect. Or you always have to have me. It's like, well, yeah. Bill, I think, was the same way.
100%.
You have to answer the phone a certain way.
Yes, I did. And that was crazy.
Ring, ring, please answer.
And, when we moved in with Bill, it was, you are going to identify yourself on the phone. David Rowe speaking. I'm like, what? So that part of it, and there was certain words that we weren't allowed. One that just always stuck with me, which I respect. And I think we have totally tainted Bill over these 40 years. But we couldn't say the word but, referring to a part of your body.
Okay.
You had to say rear end.
Oh, gosh.
I'm not going to do what? Of course, and then when you go to school in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, whenever, and you can say but, and the teacher doesn't even care. You're talking about your butt. But again, when you get older, you respect it. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, it's bigger things. It's bigger than that.
So then so you're back home and life is happening, and I know what Bill's one of the most important people in your life now, your stepdad. Mm-hmm. How did that then really form? Can you pinpoint a change? Was it a lot of things over time that changed your heart in that regard, or?
I don't think that,
did he just keep showing up so you didn't have a choice?
No, but, I don't think such thing in his situation with us, for my sister and I. Ultimately, they had a kid, my brother Charlie. So when Charlie was born, we were already there. And you kind of wonder, hey, is this going to change things? Mm-hmm. And it never did. Bill always introduces me, which to this day, it's I think flattering. This is my son David. If I meet one of his old college fraternity brothers or something like that, this is my son David. And which I think I've earned that over 40 years. But that he did the same thing in 1985 that he's doing in 2022. Mm-hmm. But to go back to your question, I don't think there was ever anything. Bill never changed. Bill was always Bill. And I think the older I got, the more the clouds were kind of pulled away. Oh, well, that's why he did this. Or, why I always hear people say, he's one of the most respected human beings they know. I say, yeah, I see it every day. There's just something, I don't know, man, and I wish I could put it better, but he is and no disrespect to my father, and my father knows this. I mean, my dad's my dad. And Bill, I think ultimately I was blessed with two great male figures in my life that I can pick a little here, pick a little there, a lot here, a lot there, whatever. There's things I can say on both sides that's not what I'm going to do when I raise my child. That's my choice. But I've had an unbelievable roadmap, and I know we're not talking about my real father, but as far as my stepfather goes, I think that he's given me everything in the world, and I don't care knowledge. I mean, there's times where you want to call Bill and just say, okay, what do you, and there's so many times when I've done it and I know what the answer is going to be. I just want to hear him say it,
That's awesome.
Wow.
And just to get to where our relationship is, there's no defining moment. Like I said, I just think it's over time, and maybe I even knew it then. But again, when you're young and you're trying to answer these questions for yourself, and some of those decisions I made, I regret. That, moving here, moving there, it's always like chasing something that I don't know if it's really chasing something, because I had everything and that I could possibly want. But I think at the end of the day, for that specific scenario of me leaving Columbia, Mom's like, you gotta go, it's like telling somebody go chase their dream, wants to be a musician in Nashville, go do it. You're one of a million down there right now. So if you don't do it, then, 20 years later, you're like, oh, what if I would have,
Yeah. So what would I'm just curious, like looking back, what would you tell your younger self going through that now that you're here? Because we actually have a lot of kids that listen too, right?
Sure.
And blended families are so common. Speaking to kids, what would you say to them in that situation? They're in the midst of it.
That's going to be the longest answer I've ever given, but because it's I don't think that I would change anything, honestly. And I guess that's the easy answer because, again, I'm 47 and I look back and go, okay, you turned out okay. I'm not in prison. I didn't kill anybody.
That's good, yeah.
I'm not homeless, or whatever it may be.
Right. You survived.
But there are things that, especially kids, that I would love, like, it's going to be tough. It is tough. And if it's not tough, something's not right. Like, you don't just pop in. I mean, a family. You're talking about a family going into somebody else's house, their territory, their whatever. To feel that out, that's tough. Regardless, I don't care. Again, if somebody says, "Oh, hey, it was great. We moved. It was great. It's like vacation every day." No way. No way. So again, for me, I wouldn't change anything because I learned a lot from it. As a mother, probably don't want to hear that, but don't just stay where you're at. You always live under my roof, and whatever. For the kids, it's a struggle, man. I mean, you guys see it, and some days, some weeks, it just sucks. I think if I could go back and change anything, I would want to take the hurt away from that I caused. My one side of the family that I left when I was a freshman, essentially the other side of my family when I left when I was a senior in high school. I had a little brother and sister in St. Louis that looked up to me. I mean, they were 5 and I guess 3, and all of a sudden I'm gone. Same with Charlie here, my little brother here in Columbia. He's in, I don't know, 1st, 2nd grade, I'd guess, when I left to go live with my dad. And all of a sudden I'm gone. I mean, I was his big brother. I'm gone. I'm packing my stuff. And at that time, it's like, I'll see you, man. I'll see you. But I didn't wake up. He would sleep with me, It was, those. And all of a sudden, he's gone, and I'm gone. And for those things, yes, I would take that back in 2 seconds. But for me, it was me. I had to do it because I think if I didn't, then things would be miserable for everybody. Should we do this? Should we do this? Should we do this? And you don't do it. And you're like, man, we should have done that. And the ship's already sailed. Or damage has been done.
I love that you have, you always take everything I know about you, always take ownership. Like even now, you're taking ownership of if there's one thing, it would be your decisions, right? And I love that you're able to be that success story of, I have a positive relationship with my real dad and my bonus mom. I have a great relationship with your mom and your bonus dad now. So much to the point, one of the things I always love about your relationship with Bill is, I think really truly you honored him so unbelievably when you had your first child.
Mm-hmm. And that was tough, but
David named his son after Bill. Sorry, I should have clarified.
Yeah, and we did it after my stepdad and my dad. But even when I was 35, when Will was born, it still bothered me because I was afraid I was hurting somebody's feelings. Mm-hmm. That never goes away. Whether you're gonna, when you're 7 and you say, "Hey, I don't want to go to your house this weekend because I'm just gonna do this. I got friends," or whatever it may be. And at 35 or 36, when Will was born, it was the same. I knew what my kid, and this is, and probably nobody knows this, but my wife. I mean, I knew what we were naming our son. I had both families at the hospital that day, and everyone's like, "What's the name?" I'm like, "We don't know yet," because I just didn't want to lay it out there. Again, my dad and I have a great relationship, great father-son relationship. That's not, and it wasn't like who's going to be first in the name, who's going to be second in the name. And then essentially my son's name is Billy Bob because it's William Robert. So,
and David's dad's name is Robert.
That, but it, but that sucks because you're worried about hurting somebody's feelings. And I'll carry that till the day I die.
That's something we see a lot with the kids, and I don't think like as parents or bonus parents you realize it, right? Like even when you give kids choices, I always thought it was good to give them that flexibility, right? So before Aric and I were married, my kids had a pretty flexible schedule, and so it'd be like, well, you could go do this or you could go do that. And I actually think that was harder on kids but not even realizing that they are so afraid they're going to hurt the other parent's feelings. I think it also goes to the point of like when they start caring about a bonus dad, you feel like you're hurting the other parents. And so I think one thing that we've done too is really try to embrace the other parents too and make them almost part of our family so the kids don't feel like they're choosing. But to your point, I'm sure it never goes away. When you have kids of your own and then it's like, which grandparent?
Where do you spend Christmas? Where do you don't want to offend, and you're, maliciously like, hey, we're doing this because we're going to get at them. And I don't, again, from the time, whether it's like choosing to go see my dad when I lived with my mom or vice versa and say, hey, as you get older, friends, activities, sports, whatever it may be, I always carried that with me. And again, it's just one of those things that going back just what we just talked about, having my son's name Will, my dad and I never talked about it. My dad, respects the heck out of my stepdad and I assume appreciates everything he's done for me over my life. And if he doesn't, then he's an idiot. But no, in all seriousness, it's, again, I always, I'm cognizant of their feelings. And sometimes were the choices right or wrong? Yeah. I mean, you made a wrong decision. And then somebody brings a light and goes, hey, when you did that, did you really think about that? And you're like, oh. So then the next time something comes around, you're like, oh God, who am I going to offend now?
Right. Yeah.
And that sucks, man. But that's also part of it. I think the earlier on, like you said, earlier on when you lay it on the table at a younger age, hey, just know I'm here. Whatever you decide to do, in those choices, I'm still your mom. I'm still your dad. Whatever it may be, but it still sucks. It's part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
I asked you a lot of questions when we were first talking about this a few years ago before Angie and I got married. We were, getting serious dating, and you and Megan have a beautiful traditional family, but you had been through the whole part of having a stepdad. And I was asking, what do I do? How do I make this work? And you would give me great advice as to just stay in the course and be in myself, things like that. I mean, what advice would you give to parents like myself and Angie that are learning to blend families for the first time?
I think ultimately, again, when you join two families together, it's got to be tough, right? I haven't experienced it as an adult, but, I think the parent has to stay true to their beliefs. Obviously, you go through dating, and then the kids meet each other, hang out, and whatever, and then ultimately you come to the decision to get married. I don't know if it's advice or what. I don't know. Like you just said, stay the course, because it's going to be tough. There's going to be great days, bad days, whatever it may be. To say it always works out is a lie. We know that. Yeah. I know people that it just didn't work out but there are ways to make it work out. If I knew, I'd be a multimillionaire and I'd write a book. But in my personal experience, again, there was things I had to go learn on my own as the older I got. When I got to a certain age, I realized the things that, again, my stepdad would have his ways of doing things. This was his house. That's his house. He's married to my mom, but we're living under his roof, and we are a family now. When mom was living by herself with us three, we are our own different things, but the processes of every day are changed immensely. So I wish I had a great, perfect piece of advice to say, hey, this is the magic pill. It's not. It's the fact to accept that it's not going to be perfect.
I would say through our conversations, what really struck with me, and I don't even know that you said it this way, it was just this is how I took it. In different conversations we had, it was like Chace is growing up. He wasn't even a teenager at the time he is now. Like, he's going to continue to be changing and doing other things. You can't change. You have to stay who you are every day, because otherwise he's even more confused if you're changing things on him as well. Like, you've got to stay.
Well, he's a teenager changing weekly, hourly. You are not. And those things are, those are the life cycles and the things that come up and like, oh man, what do we do here? And so you've got to stay what you guys have agreed upon, how to raise this family, this blended family. You kind of just stick with it, And again, there's going to be some decisions that are made, whether it's by you guys or the kids individually, that probably aren't going to be the best. As a family, you get behind that and you rally as a whole group. And whether it's, you learn from that or, it's going to come up. I mean, there's many times when things come up and they're tough decisions to be made.
So one question we ask at the end of every one of our guests is, what is your favorite family tradition? Now that you have your own family, what's your favorite thing you guys do together?
I don't, specifically, nothing just jumps out at me. What I think Megan and I, with the four of us, and so many people will disagree with this. And,
Where's he going?
No. I mean, because, at the restaurant, people, talk about how's this, what are you doing, anniversary. We try to take the kids to our anniversary dinner with us. Oh. And we just experience everything together. Again, where I say people aren't going to disagree, I can't tell you, and probably it's my fault, but like Megan and I don't specifically have a date night. We do everything through our kids. From the time they were born, they're 11 and 8 right now, and 7 more years, Will's going to be out of high school and doing whatever he chooses to do. These are times I won't get back with my kids, and maybe it's part of the experiences that when I grew up, I wanted to be with my dad, or I wanted to be with my mom, but I don't know, man. We've just chosen the path as parents to, and it's not every single anniversary because sometimes we don't do anything.
Yeah.
But
that is on you.
Yeah. But no, we everything is for them, and we know one day it's not. And to think that Will's going to want to go to our anniversary dinner when he's 18, up until he's 18, it's probably about 2 or 3 more years. Be like, that's stupid. Yeah. So Megan also comes from her mom and dad were divorced. Neither one of them remarried. So there was a lot of things that she didn't experience, and everything comes to our kids. And so specific tradition, no, I think it's just a decision we've made to just do this for them, because one day we're not going to be able to.
I love that. And I do wonder if part of that so much focus on the kids and doing everything together is because of your blended family, because Aric and I talk about this often. Neither one of us came from a blended family. So we have no idea really what that's like. But all of our kids have. And it's like, what are their relationships going to be like when they start their own family because of their experiences? Are they going to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it could go a couple different ways. But I do think that having to go back and forth between parents gives them, see, we're helping them become a better family. They're going to be like, I don't want my kids to ever have to experience that because it's awful.
Yes. I mean, and that's what and whether, whether that helps my kids or not, it's what we've chosen to do. It's something that we enjoy thoroughly. I mean, there's times where like, maybe we should go to dinner. And it's like, no, I don't, we've gone on vacation, the two of us, one time in 14 years of being married. And the whole time, and this sounds stupid, we're missing the hell out of our kids. They're missing the hell out of us. They spent, that week we were gone, they spent with Mom and Bill. They enjoy their time with their grandparents, but Will's on FaceTime. And granted, it's that age. But I think part of that is we do so much with them, and maybe we've created a monster. I don't know. It's a choice we made. That's why I say a lot of people will disagree with us.
I think that's awesome.
I do too. I would have thought Will would have enjoyed that week getting to drink out of a Pepsi free and maybe a frozen Snickers, but I guess not.
No. And if he did, he was corrected about that. But I don't. Yeah.
Well, that is all the time that we have for this week. And we did actually go over, but I think it was an incredible conversation to have. And if you do have more questions, you can shoot them to us through our socials, and I'll get them to David. And he's typically nice enough to answer those kind of questions that I would have. David, thanks for joining us. Tell your family we said hello.
Will do.
You guys have a great week, and we can't wait to talk to you again next week. God bless. Thank you for listening to Blended Blessed and Always a Mess. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and at blendedblessedalwaysamess.com.
Reach out to us on any of our social channels. We would love to hear from you. Have a great week.